Most of us are haunted by the same quiet question. Why does life feel so loud, so fast, so chaotic, and yet so empty? We chase goals, approval, status, and somehow we still lie awake at night, overwhelmed, unfulfilled, spinning. But 2,000 years ago, one man ruled the most powerful empire in the world, and instead of chasing the noise, he sat in silence and asked himself better questions. His name was Marcus Aurelius, and what he discovered, alone in a war tent, facing death, betrayal and grief, could still change your life today. That's not philosophy class, that's survival, that's Stoicism. See, Meditations isn't just an old book, it's a blueprint for how to stay human when the world is trying to make you anything but. When Marcus wrote those words, he wasn't trying to be remembered. He was trying to hold on to his own sanity, his own goodness, in the middle of pain, politics and pressure most of us can't even fathom. And the crazy part, what he figured out back then, applies to everything we're still struggling with now. So if you've ever felt like you're trying to hold it all together in a world that won't stop falling apart, this is for you. Not because Stoicism is some trendy self-help hack, but because it's real, it's raw, and it's built for people like us, people who are tired of being reactive, tired of chasing meaning, and finally ready to create it. Now, if that resonates with you, even just a little, there's one simple, free way you can support what we're building here. It means a lot more than you might think. Hit that subscribe button. That's it. If you're into wisdom that actually applies to real life, you're in the right place. Let's dig into the lessons that helped an emperor stay human and can help you do the same. Marcus Aurelius didn't write meditations for an audience. He wasn't hoping for fame, followers, or a spot on a bestseller list. He wasn't building a brand. He was writing to himself, quietly, privately, honestly. And that's exactly why it cuts deeper than most books ever could. It wasn't edited for public approval. It wasn't shaped to impress scholars or flatter emperors. It was a man, alone with his thoughts, trying to hold himself together in a world that kept trying to pull him apart. And in that brutal honesty, we find something rare, truth that hasn't been diluted by ego. He wasn't trying to sound wise. He was trying to stay decent. He was trying to remind himself how to respond when the world disappointed him, how to remain calm when others lost their temper, how to hold on to virtue when it would have been easier to give in to rage, bitterness, or despair. That's what makes meditations feel so alive. It doesn't talk at you. It whispers with you. It walks alongside your worst days and offers you something no lecture ever could: understanding. It doesn't pretend things are easy. It just insists they're worth enduring. You read it and you don't see a marble statue of a perfect man. You see someone struggling, a ruler facing plagues, wars, betrayals, burying multiple children, losing his wife, and still trying to get up in the morning and act with dignity. He writes things like, "When you arise in the morning, think of what a precious privilege it is to be alive." But you know from the tone, he's probably writing that because he doesn't feel like getting out of bed. He's coaching himself, not preaching to you. And somehow, that hits harder than all the polished advice in the world. That's the strange paradox of meditations. It was never meant to be shared, and yet that's what makes it so shareable. Its power lies in its rawness. Its unpolished nature is what gives it polish in a deeper sense. Because it's not afraid to look messy, it feels clean. Because it's not performative, it's profound. You don't feel like you're reading a philosopher on a pedestal. You feel like you're reading a man sitting in a war tent, holding a pen with one hand and holding back grief with the other. And maybe that's why, after all these years, it still resonates. Because in a world addicted to appearance, to performance, to pretending, Marcus shows us what it looks like to be real. He writes, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That line alone has outlived centuries of political theory, moral essays, and religious sermons. Not because it's perfectly worded, but because it's painfully honest. It gets under your skin and asks, are you being the person you keep talking about becoming? Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But to do that, you have to first confront the parts of yourself you'd rather hide. That's what Marcus was doing. He was confronting his ego, his anger, his fear of death, his frustration with others. And in doing so, he was doing something many of us avoid, facing the truth without flinching. That's not weakness, that's courage. And that's why Meditations endures, because it models a kind of strength that doesn't come from conquest, but from inner clarity. There's something deeply human about reading the words of a Roman emperor who admits he loses his temper, who reminds himself not to crave applause, who struggles with ambition and grief just like the rest of us. It reminds you that titles and power don't protect anyone from the human condition. Aristotle said, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Marcus took that seriously. Every page is an attempt to know himself better, so that he could lead better, love better, live better. That kind of self-awareness is timeless, and yet it's more than just introspection. It's discipline. He's not journaling to vent. He's writing to train his mind, to remind himself of the kind of man he wants to be. That's why the book returns to the same themes again and again. Control your emotions, don't seek praise, remember death, serve the common good. These weren't philosophical decorations, they were guardrails, they were lifelines. They were a code he could return to when everything else fell apart. Plato wrote that the first and best victory is to conquer self. Marcus lived that battle every day. You can feel it in the repetition, the constant looping back to the same reminders. Because when life keeps hitting you, you don't need a new idea. You need to remember what you already know. He was teaching himself how to stay rooted, how to keep his footing, how to not be swept away by the flood of chaos that comes for all of us sooner or later. And this is where the magic happens, because even though Meditations was written for one man, it ends up being for everyone. Why? Because it's not trying to impress anyone. It's not pretending to have all the answers. It's not afraid to say, I'm still learning. And in that vulnerability, we see ourselves. We see our own attempts to grow, our own failures to live up to our ideals, and we realize we're not alone. That realization matters, because in today's world, we're drowning in information, but starving for wisdom. We scroll endlessly, consume constantly, but rarely pause to reflect. Marcus reminds us to slow down, to think, to choose, to live on purpose, not just on autopilot. Socrates once said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." But Marcus shows us what the examined life actually looks like. It's not glamorous, it's not perfect. It's a daily effort to stay aligned with what matters. And what mattered to Marcus? Not wealth, not legacy, not comfort. What mattered was character, integrity, compassion, resilience. He wasn't trying to be remembered, he was trying to be useful, and that distinction between chasing attention and offering value is what separates wisdom from noise. It's easy to get swept up in modern performance, to curate your life instead of living it. But Marcus pulls you back to something older, something quieter, something stronger. He reminds you that the point isn't to be liked by others, it's to live in a way you respect. To be at peace with yourself when your head hits the pillow. That kind of peace can't be bought, it can't be faked, it has to be earned. And Marcus spent his life trying to earn it. When you read his words, you're not getting advice from someone who had it all figured out. You're getting field notes from someone who was in the mud with you, fighting the same internal battles, stumbling over the same temptations, and trying every day to rise a little higher. That humility is what gives the book its power. It doesn't shout. It doesn't preach. It just walks beside you. That's the kind of philosophy we need more of today. Not abstract theory, not academic jargon, but real grounded wisdom that helps you handle life when it's hard, that helps you build an inner compass you can trust, that teaches you how to act with grace when everything around you feels graceless. Marcus reminds us that leadership isn't about dominance, it's about discipline. That strength isn't about control, it's about character. And that peace isn't something the world gives you, it's something you build from within. His life, his writing, his example, they all point back to that one truth. The real work is always inside. So when you open Meditations, you're not stepping into history. You're stepping into a conversation, a very old, very intimate, very human conversation. And the beauty of it is that you're invited in. You don't need to be a scholar. You don't need to understand Latin. You just need to be honest with yourself. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all, that the path to wisdom isn't found in pretending to know everything. It's found in admitting where you still struggle and showing up anyway, day by day, thought by thought, page by page, just like Marcus did. Because that's what being Stoic really means. Not shutting down your feelings, but learning how to carry them with strength. Not pretending you're perfect, but trying to be better. Not chasing applause, but living by principle, quietly, consistently, with courage. And that kind of life, it doesn't need an audience, it just needs your full attention. You don't need a take. That might sound strange in a world that runs on opinions, but it's true. You don't have to weigh in on every headline, every debate, every drama. You don't need to comment, post, argue, or declare where you stand every time the world offers you a spotlight. Marcus Aurelius lived in a world full of political tension, betrayal, war, and social division. And even then he knew, the real power is in knowing when not to speak. He wrote, "You always have the option of having no opinion. There is never a need to get worked up or to trouble your soul about things you can't control." That's more than just advice. It's a strategy. It's a form of psychological self-defense. Because every time you respond to something that doesn't need your energy, you hand over a piece of your mind. You give away focus. You lose control of your inner world. We live in a time where not reacting is treated like ignorance. Stay silent? You must not care. Don't post your take? You must not be paying attention. But Marcus wasn't trying to appear informed. He was trying to be free. And freedom, in the Stoic sense, isn't about doing whatever you want. It's about not being pulled by every passing emotion, every noise, every impulse to react. Think about the pressure we feel to respond to everything around us. Something goes viral, and there's this instant urge. What do I think about it? Do I agree or disagree? Am I on the right side of this? But that pressure comes with a cost. It costs you clarity. It costs you peace. And more importantly, it distracts you from the only thing you can truly control, your own behavior. Carl Jung once said, "Where wisdom reigns, there is no conflict between thinking and feeling." But that harmony only happens when we pause long enough to observe our own mind before jumping in. Not every thought is worth expressing. Not every issue needs your take. And not every moment requires you to take a stand, especially when that stand is based more on fear of judgment than actual conviction. This isn't about apathy, it's about discernment. Marcus wasn't passive, he was deliberate. He knew how to filter what entered his consciousness. He trained himself to recognize which things deserved his energy and which were just noise. Because noise can feel urgent. It wants your attention. It begs for a reaction. But it rarely offers anything in return. Wisdom, on the other hand, waits. It observes. It sees the storm, but doesn't step into it unless it's necessary. Aristotle said, "To avoid criticism, say nothing, do nothing, be nothing." But Marcus wasn't trying to avoid criticism, he just wasn't controlled by it. He didn't speak just to be heard. He spoke when it served the moment, when it aligned with his principles, when silence would have been dishonest. And that's the real difference. Silence isn't weakness when it's chosen from strength. It becomes weakness when it's used to hide. We've all had moments where someone said something wrong, something offensive, something clearly out of line, and we jumped in. But later, we felt exhausted, not because we stood up for something, but because deep down, we knew our reaction wasn't from clarity. It was from reflex, from ego, from the need to be seen as right. Marcus trained himself to question that impulse, not to suppress his voice, but to elevate his character. And this training, it wasn't theoretical. He was the most powerful man in the world. Every day, he dealt with flattery, betrayal, crises, and manipulation. But instead of getting caught in the whirlwind of politics and emotion, he returned again and again to the same question: is this worth my peace? That question, is this worth my peace, could save you hours of stress every week. You see a post online, it bothers you. You feel your fingers itching to type. But wait, ask the question: is this argument worth your clarity? Will this comment actually bring understanding, or just more division? We've been trained to think that engagement equals value, that if you're not actively responding, you're irrelevant. But that mindset is rooted in fear. Fear of being overlooked, fear of being excluded, fear of being wrong. Stoicism teaches us that relevance isn't about being loud, it's about being centered. When you choose not to weigh in, something unexpected happens. You start noticing more. You hear what people actually mean, not just what they say. You catch the patterns behind the problems. You begin to respond from wisdom instead of emotion. That's not detachment, it's awareness. It's the ability to sit in silence and listen to life before adding your own voice to the mix. Socrates, in his commitment to self-knowledge, was famous for saying, "I know that I know nothing." That wasn't defeat, it was liberation. Because once you stop needing to appear all-knowing, you free yourself to actually learn. And real learning starts with silence. That silence can feel uncomfortable at first, especially when everyone else is shouting. But give it time, let it deepen, let it become your default mode, observing first, then choosing. And not choosing by impulse, but by value. What's important to you? What do you stand for? What matters when the noise fades? Marcus wasn't trying to escape life. He was trying to engage with it more wisely. He knew that the mind is like a city, it needs gates. Not every voice deserves entry. Not every opinion deserves attention. Not every emotion needs a reaction. And this mental gatekeeping, this choice to pause, is what creates inner stability. It's easy to mistake silence for indifference. But the Stoics saw silence as strength. They understood that not all battles are worth fighting. Some are distractions dressed as purpose. Some are emotional traps. Some are just chaos looking for company. And if you're not careful, you become part of the noise you were trying to escape. Think about how much energy we waste trying to defend our identity, trying to explain ourselves, trying to prove we're good, moral, thoughtful, smart. But here's a hard truth. The people who already believe in you don't need convincing, and the people who are committed to misunderstanding you won't be swayed by any argument. So what if you stopped trying? What if you let your actions be your defense? What if you let your peace speak for itself? There's a story about Plato being slandered by someone in public. A friend urged him to respond, to defend himself. Plato calmly replied, "I will live in such a way that no one will believe him." That's the essence of Stoicism. Integrity, not argument. Action, not opinion. Character, not clapbacks. You don't have to win every debate. You don't have to clear up every misunderstanding. Sometimes the best response is to live so clearly that people can't twist your truth. And that kind of clarity, of purpose, of identity, of values, can only grow in silence. The truth is, your opinion is precious. It's not meant to be tossed into every fight. It's meant to be cultivated, sharpened, deepened, so that when you do choose to speak, your words actually carry weight. And here's something you might not expect. The more you practice this, the more people begin to respect you. Not because you're loud, but because you're steady. Because in a world of noise, your silence stands out. Your calm becomes a kind of authority, and your restraint becomes a kind of power. That's what Marcus was building, a quiet power, a durable peace. Not because life was easy, but because he refused to be a slave to his own reactions. So the next time you feel the urge to weigh in, to jump into the debate, to prove your point, to set the record straight, pause, breathe, ask yourself, is this noise or is this necessary? Am I being pulled or am I choosing? Because that pause might be the most stoic thing you do all day. And that's the real lesson here. Silence isn't the absence of a voice, it's the presence of strength. It's the space between stimulus and response, the space where your freedom lives, the space where your peace waits. So no, you don't have to weigh in. You don't have to have a take. You don't need to stamp every moment with a label. What you need is a mind that's free. Let that be your power. Let that be your peace. He wasn't pretending to be flawless. He was holding himself accountable, one mistake at a time. Most of his wisdom comes from where he fell short. That's not weakness. That's exactly what growth looks like. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome, the most powerful man in the world at the time, didn't sit on a golden throne and write meditations to impress anyone. He didn't craft it to gain followers, boost his image, or secure a legacy. That's what makes it powerful. It was private, honest, sometimes painfully so. It was a journal, a conversation with himself. And in that conversation, you don't find a man bragging about his triumphs. You find a man admitting, again and again, where he slipped, where his emotions got the best of him, where his ego crept in, where he forgot his values. He wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." That's not a motivational quote. That's someone coaching himself through frustration. That's a leader preparing his mind, not to explode, not to judge, but to respond with steadiness. Because Marcus knew something we often forget. Strength doesn't come from pretending to be above the struggle. It comes from being inside it and choosing not to be broken by it. We live in a culture obsessed with image, with curating perfection, with projecting certainty. But Marcus wasn't performing. He was examining. In fact, many of the entries in meditations feel like mental corrections. He'll say something like, "Don't be overheard complaining, not even to yourself." That's not him judging others. That's him checking himself. That's what Stoicism demands. Not that you never fall, but that you're honest when you do. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Marcus was doing exactly that, bringing the unconscious to light. Every frustration, every flaw, every emotional spiral, he didn't bury them. He wrote them down, he looked at them, and in doing so, he refused to let them own him. Growth doesn't look like a highlight reel. It looks like wrestling with your own thoughts. It looks like waking up and realizing, I messed up yesterday, but today I'll do better. That's the real work. not climbing to some imagined mountaintop of enlightenment, but simply staying aware, checking yourself before you go too far, catching the slip before it turns into a spiral. Think about the last time you overreacted, said something you regretted, held onto a grudge longer than you should have. What did you do afterward? Did you blame the other person? Did you justify it? Or did you, even quietly, say, "That's on me"? That moment right there, that tiny acknowledgement, is what Marcus practiced every day. And that's where growth lives. Not in perfection, but in self-awareness. Aristotle wrote, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom." Marcus took that literally. Every day he checked in, not with others, but with himself. Am I being ruled by fear, by anger, by ego? These weren't passing thoughts. They were his daily practice, his form of discipline, his mirror. And that's the difference between someone who wants to look wise and someone who becomes wise. One avoids mistakes, hides them, denies them. The other exposes them, examines them, learns from them. In one passage, Marcus reminds himself, "If someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change, for I seek the truth." That level of humility from an emperor is staggering, and it's not just poetic, it's powerful, because true growth doesn't come from clinging to being right. It comes from being willing to change your mind when a better truth presents itself. And isn't that the battle most of us fight every day? The tension between wanting to look right and actually being right, between defending our pride and admitting we've got more to learn. Marcus leaned into that tension. He let it teach him. Plato once said, "The first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself." That's exactly what Marcus was attempting, daily, quietly, imperfectly. He wasn't at war with armies alone. He was at war with himself, with his impulses, his frustration, his need to control, his desire to retaliate, his hunger for recognition. He met these enemies not with force, but with awareness, and sometimes with surrender. That's what accountability is. Not punishment, not shame, but presence, owning your part, seeing yourself clearly, and choosing every time to rise a little higher. Marcus didn't celebrate himself in his writings. He corrected himself over and over again. He would write things like, "At every hour, give your full concentration. Do everything as if it were the last thing you were doing in your life." He wasn't preaching, he was reminding himself, because like all of us, he got distracted, he got emotional, he got tired, he forgot what mattered, and instead of hiding that, he wrote it down. That's strength. Socrates taught that the unexamined life is not worth living. Marcus examined his, not once, not occasionally, but daily, even as an emperor, even during wars, even while grieving. That kind of consistency is rare, and that's where transformation begins, not in the moment of clarity, but in the habit of returning to it. You can feel his humanity in the pages. There's no ego, no arrogance, just a man trying to stay centered in the chaos of power, responsibility, loss, and temptation. He faced the same struggles we do, just amplified 1,000 times. And still, he showed up. Still, he held himself to a higher standard. Not because anyone was watching, but because he was watching. Think about that for a second. What if your life was being watched, not by others, but by your future self? The version of you 5 years from now, 10 years from now. The one who's wiser, calmer, more grounded. What would they say about the way you're living today? Would they thank you for your accountability, or would they be cleaning up the mess your ego left behind? That's what Marcus tapped into. He wasn't writing for applause. He was writing for alignment. He was staying accountable to the only person he couldn't lie to, himself. And maybe that's the most powerful lesson of all, that real self-respect isn't built on being flawless. It's built on being real, on being honest enough to say, I slipped, but I see it, and I'll do better tomorrow. It's not glamorous, it's not easy, but it's rare. And in a world obsessed with filters, with performance, with always appearing in control, there's something revolutionary about simply saying, I'm still learning. So if you're on that path of holding yourself accountable, of admitting where you fall short, of choosing to grow instead of pretend, then you're already walking beside Marcus, not in history, but in practice, in mindset, in courage. Because that's what courage looks like, not standing tall on a stage, but kneeling quietly in front of your own mistakes and saying, teach me. He lists the names of emperors long forgotten, men who once ruled, who commanded armies, who shaped nations, and whose names now slip through history like dust through fingers. And then, in the same breath, Marcus Aurelius reminds himself, I will be one of them, forgotten. Eventually erased from memory, just like the rest. But he doesn't flinch, he doesn't despair, because he never clung to legacy, he clung to character. That shift in focus changes everything. We live in a world obsessed with legacy, how we'll be remembered, how big our name will be, how many people know who we are. Social media has only amplified this hunger. Fame now seems just a post away. Visibility feels like power. And yet, here is Marcus, the most powerful man of his time, and he's telling himself, soon you'll be ashes or bones, a mere name at most, and even that is just a sound, an echo. That's not nihilism, that's clarity. He's not saying life is meaningless, he's saying, stop trying to make your meaning depend on things that will never last. Stop chasing applause you'll never hear. Instead, build your life on something no one can take from you, your values. It's easy to confuse legacy with purpose, but legacy is external. It's how the world remembers you. Purpose is internal. It's how you live with yourself. Marcus chose the second, because legacy is a dangerous addiction. The more you chase being remembered, the more you shape your life for the crowd. You start making decisions not because they're right, but because they look impressive. You begin speaking not with honesty, but with strategy. You become less yourself and more a performance. But Marcus understood what most never do. You can't control how you'll be remembered. You can only control how you show up, what you stand for, what kind of person you are when no one's watching. That's what he meant when he said, waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. Not because people are watching, but because you are watching. Plato wrote, the first and greatest victory is to conquer yourself. Marcus took that seriously. His victory wasn't over the Parthians or Germanic tribes. It was over the temptation to make his reign about power instead of principle. In a world that begged him to rule with dominance, he chose discipline. In a palace filled with temptation, he practiced restraint. In an empire that offered him worship, he humbled himself daily. Think about how rare that is. Most people, when given a taste of power, crave more. They become addicted to being seen, being followed, being praised. They want to build monuments, not just of stone, but of image. But Marcus saw through all that. He knew fame was fleeting. Praise is temporary. The crowd is fickle. What lasts is character. What matters is virtue. What endures is integrity. He reminded himself constantly that people's opinions were out of his control. He even wrote, all is ephemeral, fame and the famous as well. And yet, how often do we live our lives as if public approval is the finish line? We work for recognition, for awards, for likes, for retweets, and then we wonder why we feel empty even after we get them. Because applause can't fill you. It can only distract you from the work that actually builds peace. Carl Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And that's what Marcus did in Meditations. Not perfectly, not all at once, but persistently. Day by day, entry by entry, he faced himself. Not as a figure of grandeur, but as a man trying to live well, not to impress, but to align. He knew his name would fade, but his soul, that was his responsibility, that was his masterpiece, and that's why, even though he knew he'd be forgotten, he wrote anyway, not to be remembered, but to remember himself, to keep himself centered, aligned, awake. Socrates was once told that the oracle at Delphi proclaimed him the wisest man in Athens. But Socrates didn't let it inflate his ego. He doubled down on his quest for truth, for inner clarity. He said, "I know that I know nothing." Because the goal was never to appear wise, it was to live wisely. The same thread runs through Marcus. He didn't care about appearing moral, he cared about becoming moral. And that's the invitation Stoicism extends to us, not to chase the spotlight, but to light our own path, to measure ourselves not by external applause, but by internal alignment. Did I live today in a way that reflects my values? Did I hold myself to the standard I claim to believe in? Did I do the right thing even when no one clapped? These are the questions that matter. Legacy is loud, character is quiet. Legacy wants a crowd. Character just needs a conscience. Legacy asks, "What will they say about me?" Character asks, "What do I know to be true?" And here's the irony. If you live for legacy, you may lose both legacy and character. But if you live for character, sometimes legacy follows anyway, quietly, naturally, as a side effect, not a goal. Marcus didn't make decisions with history in mind. He made decisions with virtue in mind, and because of that, history remembers him, not for his conquests, but for his convictions. He reminds us that the size of your stage doesn't determine the strength of your soul. You don't need to lead an empire to live with integrity. You don't need a title to practice humility. You don't need 1,000,000 followers to be grounded in purpose. You just need to decide what matters and live like it does. So what matters to you? Fame or peace? Recognition or integrity? What do you want your days to stand for? Because in the end, your life isn't built in grand gestures. It's built in the small choices you make when no one's watching. It's built when you return the shopping cart, when you admit you were wrong, when you stay honest even when it costs you, when you keep your word, not for credit, but because it's who you are. Marcus wrote, "If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake, I will gladly change." That's the mark of a man who isn't obsessed with looking right, but with being real. And that's what makes his wisdom last. Not that he had all the answers, but that he kept asking the right questions. Questions like, what kind of person do I want to be? Am I living like it? What am I clinging to that doesn't matter? He knew that death would come. That time would erase his name, that the Roman Empire would eventually fall. But he also knew that the human soul is timeless, that courage is timeless, that discipline, humility, compassion and reason, they echo far beyond any headline or statue. So maybe the goal isn't to be remembered. Maybe the goal is to be real, to live in such a way that even if no one ever tells your story, the people you touched will never forget how you made them feel. Not because you were impressive, but because you were grounded, honest, present. Don't build your life chasing applause you'll never hear. Build it on values you'll never regret. Let your name fade. Let your face disappear. Let history forget you, but let your soul remain intact. Let your integrity whisper louder than the world shouts. And when you lie down at the end of the day, may your peace be your legacy. Floods, wars, death, betrayal. Marcus endured all of it. Plagues that decimated the empire, rebellions that tested his reign, the betrayal of trusted generals, the loss of children, one after another, the constant presence of death not as a metaphor, but as a companion. And still, he kept showing up. Day after day, page after page, he returned to his journal, to his discipline, to his principles. Why? Because he understood something we often forget. The storms outside don't have to become storms inside. He didn't let heartbreak make him bitter. He let it make him better. And there's a massive difference between the two. Bitterness is easy. It's automatic. When life hurts you, when people disappoint you, when the world feels unfair, it's natural to armor up, to close off, to see everything through the lens of pain. But Marcus knew that once you let pain twist your perspective, you lose the only thing you truly control, your character. So instead, he chose the harder path, the Stoic path. He didn't suppress the pain, he studied it, he examined it, he let it shape him without defining him. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." That wasn't theory, that was survival, because outside events were a relentless flood. Plagues, civil unrest, war on multiple borders, personal tragedy. Marcus could have collapsed. He could have turned cruel, detached, cynical, but he didn't. He chose to keep showing up, fully, honestly, even when it broke his heart. He lost his children and still reminded himself not to expect permanence. "You could leave life right now," he wrote. "Let that determine what you do and say and think." This wasn't morbid. It was grounding. It was his way of staying connected to what mattered. Because when death sits close, you stop wasting time. You stop taking people for granted. You stop running from discomfort and start showing up for life exactly as it is, even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. He didn't glamorize suffering, but he didn't avoid it either. He believed deeply that pain is a teacher, not a punishment, a lesson in what we value, a mirror of our ego, a test of our principles. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Marcus lived that. He didn't escape the darkness. He walked through it, wrote through it, grew through it. Every line of Meditations is a man wrestling with heartbreak, disappointment, injustice, and still choosing virtue. Think about that the next time life punches you in the gut, when you feel abandoned, when your plans fall apart, when someone you trust turns their back. You have two choices, harden or grow. Marcus chose to grow. He could have used power to numb himself, distraction, pleasure, anger, but he didn't. He chose to face reality, fully awake. He reminded himself, if it is endurable, then endure it. Stop complaining. That wasn't coldness, that was resilience. It was a refusal to be ruled by resentment. Betrayal, he faced it. Loss, he accepted it. War, he led through it. Every time life knocked him down, he got back up. Not because he was invincible, but because he was grounded in values, in discipline, in the constant reminder that this moment, no matter how painful, was shaping him. There's a reason we still read Marcus 2,000 years later, not because he was perfect, but because he kept going, kept learning, kept loving virtue more than comfort. When the Antonine Plague ravaged the empire, he didn't flee to safety. He stayed, served, led. Even as death swept through the population, even as his own health declined, he chose duty, chose presence, chose purpose. That's what showing up looks like. And we're not talking about grand gestures. Showing up isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it means simply getting out of bed when you don't want to, writing the truth when it scares you, being kind when your heart is still broken, owning your emotions instead of unloading them on others, choosing the next right thing when everything feels wrong. Showing up isn't about being unshakable. It's about being committed. Committed to growth, committed to your principles, committed to living with clarity even in chaos. Aristotle once said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. Marcus made showing up a habit, not a one-time act of bravery, but a repeated discipline, a decision made each day, not to give up, not to numb out, not to let bitterness take root. He chose to believe that life was still worth showing up for, even when it broke him, especially when it broke him, because heartbreak doesn't have to end you. It can open you, it can soften the ego, expand the soul, clarify what matters. Pain has that power, if you let it teach you. Socrates, even on trial for his life, refused to abandon his principles. He didn't beg, didn't flatter, didn't sell out. He stood in truth, calmly, firmly, fully present. Because like Marcus, he understood, your circumstances don't define your strength, your choices do. The Stoics never promised comfort, they promised clarity, and clarity begins when you stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What now?" Marcus faced unspeakable loss, and instead of collapsing, he wrote. Instead of hiding, he led. Instead of turning cold, he turned inward. He wasn't pretending to be okay. He was practicing being unbroken. That's real strength, not pretending life is fine, but choosing to live fully anyway, when everything feels like it's falling apart. Your relationships, your career, your sense of identity. You have one power no one can take from you, the power to stay engaged, not with perfection, but with presence, to keep showing up, to breathe, to reflect, to act from virtue instead of pain. Marcus could have written angry books. He could have used his position to rewrite the narrative, blame others, justify himself. But instead, he wrote meditations, not for glory, not for sympathy, but for self-correction, for realignment, for remembering what mattered. He asked himself, over and over, what is in my control? Because that question was his anchor, and it can be yours too, no matter what you're facing, betrayal, loss, heartbreak, disappointment. You have a choice. Will you let it close your heart or deepen your character? Bitterness is easy. Just stop caring, build walls, expect the worst. But that's not strength. That's fear in disguise. Real strength is vulnerability with discipline. It's saying, yes, I've been hurt. Yes, I feel lost. But I still choose to love, still choose to lead, still choose to live. Not perfectly, but honestly. So when life knocks the breath out of you, remember Marcus. Remember the emperor who cried in silence, wrote to himself in grief, and chose action when retreat was easier. He showed up for life, even when it was breaking him. And that choice, that daily, humble, human choice, is what made him great. Not the throne, not the power, not the empire, but the quiet decision to keep his heart open when the world tried to shut it. You have that same power. You can keep showing up, not for the world's approval, but for your own evolution, for the person you're becoming through the struggle, for the peace that waits on the other side of persistence. Let pain shape you, not define you. Let heartbreak refine you, not harden you. And let Marcus remind you that being broken doesn't mean you're done. It means you're being rebuilt, wiser, clearer, deeper. So stand up, show up. Even now, especially now. Your co-worker, your ex, that driver who cut you off. They're not blocks in your path, they're the path itself. It doesn't always feel that way. It feels like they're interruptions, obstacles, roadblocks to your peace and progress. The co-worker who micromanages, the ex who left things unresolved, the stranger who disrespects you with a horn blast or a finger in traffic. You tell yourself, if they weren't in the way, I'd be fine. But Marcus Aurelius reminds us, they are the way. He wrote, people are your proper occupation, not your distraction, not your excuse, but your work, not to fix them, not to judge them, but to meet them as tests of your own discipline, your kindness, your values. That's the part we miss. We think growth happens in solitude, in silence, on mountaintops and meditation pillows. But it's easy to be calm when no one's annoying you. It's easy to be kind when no one's triggering you. The real test, the real measure of who you are, is how you respond to the people who challenge your ego, your patience, your expectations. Marcus knew this because he lived it. He wasn't journaling from a monastery. He was writing while leading armies, while managing senators, while grieving lost children and navigating betrayals in his court. Every day people pulled at his energy, tested his integrity, demanded his time, and instead of resenting them, he used them as mirrors, as reminders, as practice. He wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." When he said that, he wasn't just talking about illness or misfortune. He was talking about people too, because nothing triggers us faster than other people. They push our buttons, stir our insecurities, reflect the parts of us we haven't fully mastered. But if you let them, they also reveal your growth, your gaps, your grace. Let's be honest. It's easy to love humanity in theory. It's people in real life who make it hard. The friend who flakes, the boss who criticizes, the parent who never seems satisfied. And yet, these are the moments that define you, not just as a Stoic, but as a human being. Carl Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." That's exactly what Marcus practiced. He didn't just tolerate people, he used his reactions to them as signals. If he felt anger rising, that was an invitation to study it. If he felt superior, that was a cue to check his pride. If he felt annoyed, that was a challenge to choose patience. This isn't about letting people walk all over you. It's about not letting them knock you off your path. The truth is, anyone can meditate in a quiet room. The real work is staying centered when someone is disrespectful in a meeting, when your ex texts something passive-aggressive, when someone cuts you off in traffic and your instinct is to respond with rage. Marcus didn't aim to control others. He aimed to control himself. And that's the only real power any of us have. He reminded himself, it's not things that upset us, but our judgments about them. He extended that wisdom to people. He knew people don't upset us just by existing. It's our expectations, our attachments, our reactions to who we think they should be that upset us. So what if we dropped the judgment? What if we saw each difficult person as a trainer showing up to refine our patience, to sharpen our understanding, to expose the parts of us that still need work? You don't need more peace and quiet to grow. You need the humility to see growth in chaos, in conflict, in discomfort. That means your co-worker's constant negativity. That's your training ground for compassion. Your ex's bitterness, a test of your boundaries. That rude driver, a masterclass in self-regulation. They're not obstacles, they're the curriculum. Think about it like this. You're a sculptor, and these people are the chisels. Not because they're always right, but because they shape you. They force you to clarify your values, your reactions, your identity. Plato wrote, "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle." Marcus didn't use this idea to excuse poor behavior, but to remind himself that empathy is part of strength, that understanding is part of wisdom, and that kindness isn't weakness, it's evidence of inner mastery. Because let's face it, anyone can snap, anyone can retaliate, but to stay composed when provoked. That's power. The person who triggers you the most is your greatest teacher. Not because they're wise, but because they reveal your edges, the places where you still react instead of respond, where your ego still takes the wheel, where your principles waver. And that's where the work begins. Imagine this. You walk into work and your colleague makes another passive comment. You feel your body tighten, your brain race for a comeback. But then something shifts. You remember, this isn't about them. This is about you, your center, your standard. So instead of reacting, you breathe. You return to principle. You choose the higher response, not because they deserve it, but because you do. You deserve to live untangled by pettiness, unshaken by immaturity, uncontrolled by others' chaos. That's not weakness, that's Stoic strength. Marcus knew the world wouldn't stop testing him, people wouldn't stop being people, so he stopped expecting them to change and focused on mastering his own mind. He wrote, "When someone does wrong, you must forgive him, but not because he deserves forgiveness. The wrongdoer may not, but because you deserve peace." That's the essence of Stoic resilience. Not reactive, not passive, but principled, steady, awake. And let's be clear, this doesn't mean you stay in toxic situations. It means you stop outsourcing your inner state to external behavior. You can walk away and still be kind. You can set boundaries and still show grace. You can disagree and still remain composed. Because real discipline isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about channeling it with awareness, turning anger into clarity, turning pain into insight, turning conflict into practice. Socrates said, "The greatest way to live with honor in this world is to be what we pretend to be." Most people pretend to be above the drama, but fold when challenged. Marcus aimed to live it, to embody the values he wrote about. And that's why he kept reminding himself, the world doesn't owe you peace. You have to cultivate it. And you do that in the hard moments, not in theory, but in real time. When someone disrespects you, when someone misunderstands you, when someone disappoints you, and you don't let it make you smaller. You don't let it harden you. You meet it with clarity, with courage, with compassion. That's Stoicism lived, not just studied. That's what Marcus meant when he said people are your proper occupation. Not that you have to fix them, but that they give you the opportunity to practice every virtue you claim to believe in. Patience, wisdom, courage, discipline, forgiveness. These aren't ideas, they're actions. And your ex, your co-worker, that driver, they are the training ground. They are not outside your path. They are the path. And every time you meet them with virtue instead of vengeance, you're not letting them win. You're letting you win. You're affirming your values, building your identity, solidifying your peace. So stop waiting for the world to make it easier. Get better at showing up stronger, not louder, not angrier, stronger. Because that's how you reclaim your power, not by controlling them, but by mastering yourself. Marcus knew that. Now, you do too. What if the thing you hate is the thing that's helping you most? We don't like to think that way. Pain is supposed to be bad. Frustration is something we're told to avoid. Discomfort? That's failure, right? But the Stoics offer a different lens, a reframe. What if the very thing you're trying to run from is the thing that's shaping you? What if the obstacle isn't just blocking your path? It is your path. This is the Stoic shift. Pain becomes fuel. Problems become practice. Everything becomes an opportunity, if you choose to see it that way. That's not toxic positivity. It's not pretending that everything feels good. It's something deeper. It's the discipline of asking, what is this teaching me? Even when you're in the middle of the mess. It's refusing to let pain be wasted. Marcus Aurelius didn't have an easy life. He didn't write about struggle in theory, he wrote from within it. He buried children, led wars, endured plagues, was betrayed by friends, faced sickness, insomnia, and enormous pressure. And yet, over and over, he reminded himself, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. It sounds poetic, but it's also painfully practical. He was saying, this thing I hate, this thing I didn't ask for. It's exactly what I need. Why? Because adversity doesn't just show you who you are, it makes you who you are. Think about the times in your life that changed you most. Was it comfort that transformed you, or was it pressure, loss, challenge? Almost always, it's the hard moments that sculpt us. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Marcus would agree, because pain breaks the illusion of control. It exposes where we're fragile, where we've built on shaky ground. But it also shows us what we're capable of, what we can endure, what we can rise from, what we can become. So the Stoic reframe isn't just intellectual, it's existential. It's a way of walking through life with your eyes open, willing to see pain not as the enemy, but as an instructor. Let's say you're in a job you hate. It drains you, it frustrates you, you feel stuck. Most people would numb themselves, complain endlessly, or bail impulsively. But the Stoic approach is different. You pause, you ask, what is this teaching me? Maybe it's showing you what you value. Maybe it's revealing how much of your identity is tied to external validation. Maybe it's training you to hold boundaries, to find courage, to clarify your purpose. The discomfort isn't the problem, it's the feedback. The same applies to relationships. That heartbreak, that rejection, it stings, but it also unmasks you. It shows you where you placed your worth, where your expectations were unrealistic, where your healing still needs work, and it gives you a choice, bitterness or depth. The Stoic doesn't suppress pain, they reframe it, they work with it. Aristotle said, "We are what we repeatedly do." Excellence, then, is not an act but a habit, and that habit begins with how we interpret difficulty. If you see hardship as failure, you'll shrink. But if you see it as material, raw, uncomfortable, but essential, then you begin to grow. Let's bring this closer to home. You set a goal. You start a habit. You make a decision to change. But then life pushes back. You feel resistance. You feel tempted to quit. You think, maybe this isn't meant to be. But what if that resistance is the proof that it's worth it? That's what Stoicism teaches us. Every meaningful transformation is forged through friction. Muscles grow from tension, minds grow from challenge, souls grow from pressure. The Stoics don't glorify suffering for its own sake. They just refuse to waste it. Marcus didn't say, enjoy pain. He said, use it. Because if you're willing to sit with it, study it, respond to it, you can turn even the worst days into your strongest foundation. Viktor Frankl, the psychologist and Holocaust survivor, once said, "When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves." That is the Stoic path. Not controlling everything, but becoming stronger, clearer, freer within anything. So next time you're frustrated, pause. Ask, what's the lesson here? Next time you're hurt, pause. Ask, what is this teaching me about myself? Next time life feels unfair, pause. Ask, how can I rise through this, not just survive it? That's not weakness, that's alchemy, turning frustration into focus, turning disappointment into direction, turning chaos into clarity. Marcus didn't become wise because life was easy. He became wise because he stayed awake through the storms. He journaled, he questioned, he took responsibility for his emotions, even when they overwhelmed him. He wrote, "If you are pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs you, but your own judgment about it, and it is in your power to wipe out that judgment now." Notice what he didn't say. He didn't say you should deny the pain. He didn't say pretend it doesn't hurt. He said, challenge your interpretation. Because once you realize you can choose your frame, you can choose your response, you've already reclaimed your power. The thing you hate might be the thing that saves you. The failure that humbles you, the rejection that redirects you, the silence that teaches you to listen, the struggle that shapes your resilience. But only if you let it. Only if you stop resisting what is and start using it to become who you're meant to be. Socrates was sentenced to death for speaking truth. He didn't panic, he didn't run. He accepted his fate, not because he wanted to die, but because he believed in integrity more than comfort. That's the Stoic spirit, not passive acceptance, purposeful acceptance, active surrender. So when you feel stuck, angry, ashamed, pause. What if this moment is exactly what you needed? Not to punish you, but to prepare you. Not to break you, but to build you. There's power in that, there's peace in that, and most of all, there's freedom in that, because you stop being a victim of life. You become a partner in your own evolution. And that's what Marcus wanted, for himself, for us. Not a life without problems, but a mind trained to meet them with wisdom. So next time life hands you something you didn't ask for, pause and ask the most Stoic question of all. What if this is helping me? Marcus said we should be like the rock the waves crash upon, and he didn't say that lightly. He lived it. The waves in his life weren't metaphorical. They were brutal, relentless, and real. Death stalked his children. War consumed his borders. Political betrayal tested his trust. He was emperor of the most powerful empire in the world, but not even he could command the weather of life to calm down. He couldn't stop the storms. So instead, he became the rock, still, present, unmoved. Because life will never stop throwing storms at you. It doesn't care how good your intentions are. It doesn't adjust itself to your plans. There's no break room, no time out, no final destination where everything's finally stable, finally easy, finally calm. That's the fantasy, and the faster you let go of it, the freer you become. See, the Stoics didn't waste time fantasizing about a perfect life. They trained for the life they had. Marcus wasn't looking for a way around adversity. He was looking for a way through it. That's what the rock represents. Not perfection, not denial, but preparation. The disciplined mind that says, I may not choose the storm, but I choose how I show up in it. And that's where your power lives. We're taught to flinch, to chase comfort, to back away when life gets messy. But what if the storm isn't here to break you? What if it's here to reveal you? Marcus believed it was. He believed life's waves don't just test you, they show you who you are. And when you don't like what you see, that's your work. So you learn to stand still, not out of apathy, but out of awareness, out of depth. Stillness isn't the absence of emotion, it's the refusal to let emotion hijack your behavior. It's the wisdom to feel fully without losing your footing. And that kind of stillness, it's rare, it's powerful. It's what people mean when they say someone has presence. It's not volume, it's gravity. It's something you cultivate moment by moment, decision by decision, wave by crashing wave. Let's make this personal. You get blindsided. Maybe a relationship ends. Maybe a job falls through. Maybe someone you trusted turns on you. Your instincts scream, react, panic, collapse. But then something quieter speaks. Hold, breathe, stay with it. That moment of pause? That's the difference. That's where the rock starts to form. You don't have to be flawless. You don't have to feel ready. You just have to stop giving your strength away to every crashing wave. You don't chase the wave. You don't become the wave. You endure the wave. And you learn that it always passes. You begin to understand that stillness is not inaction. It's intention. It's presence. It's what allows you to respond with clarity instead of reacting with chaos. And that's not coldness. That's inner power. Because anyone can explode. Anyone can shut down. Anyone can scream back at the storm. But the one who remains grounded, thoughtful, composed, that person becomes unshakable. They become what the world needs but rarely sees. Aristotle wrote, "Anybody can become angry, that is easy, but to be angry with the right person, to the right degree, at the right time, for the right purpose, that is not easy." That's the discipline Marcus was practicing, not suppression, discernment. He wasn't emotionless, he felt deeply, but he also knew that emotions are weather, and identity is the ground beneath it. If you confuse the two, you'll always be carried away by the next storm. So the goal isn't to avoid storms. The goal is to build an inner foundation that's wider than the waves, that's deeper than the winds, that can hold still, even when the world around you doesn't. And yes, it will be tested. You'll be criticized, misunderstood, overlooked, hurt, and you'll be tempted to break your character just to make a point. But here's the truth Marcus lived by. Nothing is worth your peace. Nothing is worth your integrity. The moment you let outer chaos shape your inner compass, you've lost more than any enemy could take from you. So you keep standing, not for applause, not to prove anything, but because you've decided who you are. And storms don't rewrite identity, they reveal it. Carl Jung said, "Only what is really oneself has the power to heal." And healing begins when you stop pretending to be the storm and start becoming the rock. When you no longer seek control over everything around you, but start developing mastery over what's within you. And that mastery isn't loud. It doesn't beg to be seen. It just is. Like a rock in the surf, like calm in the middle of a storm, like a soul that's rooted even when the ground shakes. So the next time life throws another wave, and it will, ask yourself, am I going to collapse into this? Or am I going to remember that I don't have to move just because something tried to move me? The storm will pass, and you'll still be here, unshaken. But let's go even deeper. What does it really mean to love your fate? Not just when it's neutral, but when it feels unfair. It means stepping into a higher order of personal responsibility. It means saying, even this, yes, this too, is part of my story. Not just accepting the chapters you like, but respecting the ones that nearly broke you. Because the fire doesn't choose what's thrown into it. It simply takes everything and burns brighter. And here's what most people never realize. The parts of your life that felt like punishment might actually be the parts preparing you for the thing you were born to do. Maybe that painful relationship taught you boundaries. Maybe that job you lost taught you value. Maybe that illness made you look inward for the first time in your life. The lesson isn't always clear when you're inside it, but clarity comes with time and courage and a willingness to ask not, why is this happening to me, but who am I becoming because of it? That's the Stoic lens. It's not a trick to feel better. It's a training of the soul to grow deeper. Marcus believed that nothing external could truly harm you unless it damaged your character. Everything else, injury, insult, misfortune, was just material, raw clay. You're the sculptor. You decide what shape it takes in your life. So when the world throws its worst at you, what do? You mold it. You reframe it. You say, this will become part of the foundation I stand on. This will become something useful. It's a practice, and like all practices, you won't always get it right. There will be days when you don't want to accept it, days when you curse the pain, days when you slip back into old habits of resentment. But even that too becomes part of the work. Growth isn't a straight line. It's a spiral staircase. Sometimes you circle back just to realize how far you've come. And through it all, the fire still burns. Remember, every time you say, "This shouldn't be happening," you're reinforcing a belief that life must obey your expectations. But it never will. The Stoics knew that life doesn't promise fairness. It only promises itself. Your job isn't to control the script. Your job is to play your role with excellence, whatever scene you're handed. Seneca wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." Marcus lived that truth. So can you. Because the power isn't in what happens. The power is in your interpretation. The power is in how you assign meaning to it. And the most empowering meaning you can assign is this: it's here to grow me. That doesn't make the pain less real. It makes the pain worth it. And the more you practice this radical, liberating, Stoic reframe, the more you start to walk differently, talk differently, carry yourself differently. Because now you're not resisting life. You're flowing with it. You're not recoiling from the fire. You are the fire. And the world feels that. They may not understand it, but they feel the steadiness, the groundedness, the quiet confidence that comes from someone who has loved even their hardest moments, someone who isn't afraid to be tested. Because when you love what happens, nothing can own you. You're not a prisoner to outcomes. You're not a hostage to circumstances. You're not waiting for the world to be perfect so you can feel peace. You carry your peace inside you, and you protect that peace, not by shielding yourself from life, but by saying yes to it all. That's not naive. That's not weakness. That's strength in its purest form. So the next time something goes wrong, and it will, you already know what to do. Don't just tolerate it. Don't just wait it out. Take it in. Turn it into fuel. Let it sharpen you, because it's not enough to accept what happens. Love it, and let it set your soul on fire. 10. Write it down, to let it go. Why did Marcus journal every day? Because reflection creates distance, and distance gives you perspective. When life pulls you into its chaos, when emotions are high, when your mind is racing, journaling becomes an anchor, not to escape the storm, but to step back just enough to see the shape of it. That's what Marcus understood. He wasn't writing to impress anyone. His pages weren't filled with polished thoughts. They were raw, uneven, repetitive. That's because they weren't meant for the world. They were meant for him, for the part of him trying to stay upright in a world that was constantly shifting under his feet. He wrote to see his mind on paper, because when you write, the whirlwind of your thoughts has to slow down enough to become words. And when thoughts become words, they become visible, manageable, moldable. Instead of drowning in feeling, you start to find form. That's the first gift of journaling. It transforms emotion into something you can study rather than something that controls you. Marcus wasn't journaling because he had nothing better to do as emperor. He was journaling because he had too much going on, leading an empire, losing his children, managing war, betrayal, illness. He didn't journal from comfort. He journaled to survive. And not survive like getting by, but survive with sanity, with clarity, with strength. When he said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events," that wasn't abstract. That was earned wisdom, captured in writing during moments of deep inner work. Writing creates that space. When something frustrates you and you write about it, the mere act of putting it into a sentence can reduce its hold on you. It forces you to name what you're experiencing, and naming is power. Carl Jung spoke often about the unconscious mind, how what we don't understand in ourselves rules us. But journaling brings the unconscious into the light. The unknown becomes known. That's how you reclaim your power. You face your thoughts. You don't flinch. You don't distract yourself. You sit with the truth and invite it onto the page. And once it's on the page, you can begin to see, where am I lying to myself? Where am I avoiding responsibility? Where am I falling into patterns that no longer serve me? Marcus did this constantly. He questioned himself more than anyone else, not because he hated himself, but because he loved the idea of becoming better. The journal was his way of sculpting his soul. Every page, a chisel, every entry, a strike of self-honesty. That's what Stoicism is, not coldness, not detachment, but radical ownership of your inner life. And writing is one of the most powerful ways to live that ownership. We live in a noisy world. Everyone wants to speak. Few want to understand. Everyone wants to react. Few take the time to reflect. Marcus chose reflection, and it shows. His meditations are full of conflict, internal and external, but always pointing back to the discipline of perception. Perception, how you see what happens to you. Writing trains that. It sharpens your ability to observe yourself without judgment, to ask, what am I really feeling here? What's underneath this anger, this fear, this pride? It slows you down, and in that slowness, insight has a chance to emerge. The Stoics knew the danger of unexamined emotions. Emotions aren't the enemy, but uncontrolled emotion, that's what destroys empires. That's what ends friendships. That's what blinds judgment. That's why Marcus wrote, because unchecked emotion clouds the mind, and a clouded mind can't lead, not a country, not a family, not even itself. So he wrote, some entries are reminders, others are corrections, some are stern, others heartbreakingly tender. He was talking to himself, but in doing so, he ended up talking to all of us. We read Marcus today because he dared to think through the chaos instead of react to it. And writing gave him the room to do that. When you pick up a pen or sit down at a keyboard, you're doing more than recording your day. You're excavating your soul. You're saying, I'm not going to be a prisoner of my mind. I'm going to become its master, thought by thought, word by word. Journaling doesn't always feel profound in the moment. Sometimes you're just dumping frustration onto the page. But even that, especially that, is valuable because it's honest. And honesty with yourself is the foundation of any real change. Marcus didn't filter his thoughts. That's what makes his writing timeless. He admitted when he was frustrated. He admitted when he failed. He wrote about being tired, about being tempted, about trying to be good in a world that often rewards the opposite. That kind of honesty is rare, and it's what makes him trustworthy. He wasn't performing, he was processing, and in that process, he became stronger. Writing is a way to interrupt the noise, to step outside the blur of life and ask, what's really going on here? And that distance, that pause, is often all you need to see your situation with fresh eyes. You start to recognize patterns. You start to see what you keep reacting to. You start to notice what you've been avoiding. And slowly, a kind of inner map forms, a record of your thinking, a trail of your transformation. Marcus left us that trail, not on purpose, but thank God he did, because in reading it, we're reminded that wisdom isn't found, it's built. It's carved out of daily practice, of showing up to the page when you don't feel like it, of wrestling with your thoughts until something clear and grounded comes through. We often think of writing as expression, but in Stoicism, writing is inspection, a tool for truth, a way to track the distance between who you are and who you aspire to be. That distance matters. Because it's easy to deceive others, harder to deceive yourself, if you're honest. And on the page, that honesty reveals your real work. It shows you where you've been acting out of ego, where you've been blaming others, where you've abandoned your principles, and it also shows you where you've grown, where you've paused instead of reacted, where you've chosen strength over impulse, where you've shown compassion in the face of chaos. The page remembers, even when you don't. And the more you write, the more you evolve, not in grand epiphanies, but in quiet, consistent clarity, in reflection that compounds over time. That's how Marcus trained his mind to lead, not just others, but himself. And it's how you can do the same. You don't need perfect words. You don't need a system. You just need to start. Write about what's bothering you, what you're afraid of, what you're avoiding, what you want, what you miss, what you're grateful for. No one has to see it. That's the beauty. It's not performance, it's practice. And that practice repeated builds something priceless. Perspective. And from perspective comes peace. And from peace you move through the world less reactive, more grounded, more aware. You stop saying everything that comes to mind. You stop chasing things that don't matter. You start choosing your thoughts with intention. You become more deliberate, more discerning, more disciplined. And not because someone told you to, but because you discovered what matters. That's what writing does. That's why Marcus did it. And that's why you should too. He wanted to be full of love, but free of destructive passion. And that distinction matters more than most people realize. Because love, in its purest form, uplifts. It strengthens. It makes you better, not needier. But when love is distorted by uncontrolled passion, it can become the very thing that weakens us. Marcus Aurelius understood that. He wasn't striving for emotional suppression. He was training for emotional clarity. You see, passion, when left unchecked, consumes. It clouds your judgment. It pulls you out of yourself. The Stoics saw this not as a sign of life, but as a failure of discipline, not because they were cold or detached, but because they understood how easily the flame of love could turn into a wildfire that destroys. Marcus didn't want to be immune to love. He wanted to love right, with steadiness, with perspective, with strength. That's the rarest kind of love, the kind that doesn't panic when someone pulls away, the kind that doesn't crumble under rejection, the kind that isn't born from hunger but from wholeness. Most of what we call love today is just possession wrapped in poetry. It's desire that demands, affection that negotiates, passion that overwhelms. Marcus didn't want any of that. He wanted something deeper. He wanted a love that could endure disappointment without collapsing, that could exist without constantly seeking validation, that could give freely without losing its center. Because when you lose yourself in someone else, that's not love, that's dependence. And dependence breeds fear. Fear of loss, fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough. And fear is the root of so much pain in relationships, not just romantic ones, but in families, friendships, even with colleagues. When your emotions own you, you're not free. And Stoicism, above all, is about inner freedom. Marcus practiced a love that was grounded, measured, still warm but not chaotic. He understood what Aristotle once wrote: "To love is to will the good of the other." That's it. No possession, no craving, just the desire to see someone flourish, whether they stay or go, whether they return your love or not. That's the kind of love that doesn't destroy you. That's the kind of love that actually gives life to both of you. It's easy to confuse that kind of love with being cold, but it's not coldness, it's strength, the kind of strength that can hold pain without projecting it, that can see clearly even when emotions rise. That can stay rooted in values instead of being yanked around by moods. Destructive passion, is love without discipline. It says, I need you to behave a certain way so I can feel okay. But Stoic love says, I will love you without conditions because my peace does not depend on your choices. There's a power in that, a freedom. Marcus wanted that freedom. He worked for it every day. When he wrote about temperance and reason, he wasn't shutting himself off. He was building an inner structure that could hold both love and logic without collapsing under either. That balance doesn't just happen, it has to be built. And it's built by examining your impulses, watching how you respond when you're hurt, when you're ignored, when you're tempted to react out of pride or fear or longing. That's when you train. That's when you ask yourself, am I acting from my highest self or from my wounded self? The Stoics weren't against emotion. They were against being ruled by it. Emotional clarity doesn't mean never feeling. It means knowing what you're feeling and choosing how to respond. It means pausing long enough to ask, is this love? Or is this attachment? Is this compassion? Or is this control? That pause changes everything. Most people don't pause. They react, they lash out, they cling, they run, and then they call that love. But love, real love, has room for pause, for breath, for thought. It doesn't rush you into madness. It calls you into presence. That's what Marcus was after, and you can feel it in his writing, in how he speaks of others, in how he speaks to himself. He knew that love without control becomes obsession, that compassion without boundaries becomes chaos, and that ungoverned passion, no matter how poetic, ultimately enslaves the one who feels it. So he wrote his way into wisdom. He reminded himself that emotions are signals, not commands, that desire is natural, but not always noble, that even love must be examined, purified, brought under the guidance of reason. This wasn't emotional coldness, it was maturity. And maturity is the willingness to love without addiction, to connect without losing yourself, to care deeply and still walk away if walking away is what your values demand. It's rare, but it's possible, and it's worth practicing, because when your love is clear, when it's not clouded by fear or need or control, you become more trustworthy. You stop manipulating. You stop playing games. You become someone others feel safe with, because they know you won't use their affection as leverage. And you feel safer too, because you're no longer relying on others to complete you. You've completed yourself. You've built your center. You've done the inner work. That inner work is what makes Stoic love so profound. It's not showy, it's not loud, but it's steady. It's the kind of love that can sit in silence with you and not feel awkward. The kind that doesn't need to be constantly expressed to feel real. The kind that's expressed most in action, in presence, in consistency. We often think of passion as a fire that burns hot, but the Stoics saw a different fire, the one that burns steady, the kind that warms without scorching, that lights your way without blinding you. That's emotional clarity. It's when you can say, I love you, and mean it, not because you want something from someone, but because you've chosen to offer something of yourself, freely, without strings, without performance. It's when you can walk through heartbreak and not let it harden you, when you can stay open in a world that gives you every reason to shut down, when you can feel deeply but still act wisely. It's not easy, that's why it's rare. But Marcus shows us it's possible. He chose love, but he chose the kind of love that builds, that sharpens, that elevates. Not the kind that drowns you in your own longing, not the kind that erodes your sense of self, but the kind that survives loss, that survives time, that survives even the death of the person you loved. Because the love was real, and real love leaves an imprint that chaos can't erase. So be full of love, but free of destructive passion. Be warm, but clear. Be kind, but rooted. Because the rarest kind of strength is this, to feel everything and still choose wisely. And that's what Marcus was practicing every single day. Be one, he writes, not argue about it, not talk about it. Just be. Marcus wasn't interested in appearances. He wasn't looking for a philosophical debate. He was looking for integrity. He wanted to live in alignment, not just speak about it, because he knew what many still forget, that truth isn't proven by eloquence, it's proven by embodiment. How many people preach patience but explode the moment things go wrong? How many people talk about discipline while negotiating every excuse not to show up? We live in a world full of performers, carefully curated personas, motivational words that never touch action. Marcus rejected all of that. His writing is a callback to something simpler, something real, a life where your values are visible not in your slogans, but in your habits, in your reflexes, in how you live when nobody's watching. That's what he meant by be one. One mind, one standard, one way of being, in public and in private, not fractured by mood or approval, not torn between what you say and what you do, but solid, whole, unified, because wholeness is strength. And fragmentation, that inner split between your words and your behavior, is a weakness that bleeds into everything. Marcus didn't claim perfection. Far from it. He was often writing because he'd just failed to live up to his own standard. But he didn't defend his mistakes. He observed them. He learned from them. He used them to sharpen his aim. Every entry was a course correction, back toward being the person he believed he could be. We all need that, because it's easy to talk about values when life is easy. It's in hardship that our true nature shows. That's when being one is tested. When someone slanders you, do you react with bitterness or hold to your principle of grace? When you're tempted to lie to avoid consequence, do you bend or stand in truth? When your ego is bruised, do you retaliate or remain composed? You don't have to say a word to answer those questions. Your life answers them for you. Don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Marcus said that, and it cuts deeper than we often admit. Because words are comfortable, embodiment is costly. It means sacrifice. It means holding a line when it would be easier to let it slip. It means choosing what's right over what's easy, over and over and over again. That's the work, not the talking, not the image, but the invisible effort to live as one. One of the deepest forms of peace you can experience is knowing that you are the same person, no matter where you are or who you're with. That you're not shifting to fit in, not posturing to be liked, but standing in who you are without needing to broadcast it. That kind of congruence radiates strength, not flashy strength, quiet strength. That's what Marcus cultivated, a life where principle didn't depend on conditions, where dignity wasn't for display, it was a baseline. That didn't mean he never stumbled, but when he did, he didn't hide behind philosophy. He returned to it, not as theory, as practice. He knew that the moment you separate your values from your behavior, you weaken both. You become split, divided, and a divided person is vulnerable to everything, to peer pressure, to self-doubt, to impulsivity, to the endless chase for approval. That's why he kept coming back to unity, oneness, not as some mystical abstraction, but as practical wholeness, emotional, mental, moral alignment. Carl Jung once wrote, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." That's a psychological echo of Stoic wisdom. Jung, like Marcus, understood that our lives are shaped not by what we intend, but by what we repeat. The Stoic path is not an ideology, It's a lived architecture, one that only holds if your actions hold it. So what does that look like day to day? It looks like keeping your promises, even the small ones, especially the small ones, because the way you do anything reflects the way you do everything. It looks like choosing restraint over rage, focus over distraction, purpose over popularity. It looks like being the kind of person your words describe, not just once, but habitually. That's integrity, not perfection, but consistency, alignment, the refusal to live as two different people. Marcus knew that the danger of philosophical discussion is that it can become theater. Talking becomes a substitute for action. But the Stoic doesn't aim to sound wise. The Stoic aims to become wise. And wisdom isn't what you say when the spotlight's on. It's how you carry yourself when no one's clapping. To be one is to resist fragmentation, to reject the idea that your work self, your family self, your online self, your alone self can be different people with different standards. That's not flexibility, that's disintegration, and it erodes peace. Slowly, silently, it breeds inner conflict, because part of you always knows when you're out of sync with yourself. That's why this line matters. It calls you back, not to some dramatic reinvention, but to small, courageous alignment. Be honest when it's inconvenient. Be kind when it's undeserved. Be disciplined when no one will notice. Be grounded when life is chaotic, and when you fall short, and you will, don't justify it. Don't rationalize it. Just return. Return to the path, to the standard, to the truth that lives inside you. That's what Marcus did. That's why his words still reach us centuries later. Because they weren't marketing, they were reminders. Quiet nudges from a man trying daily to become who he said he wanted to be. You can feel that sincerity in every sentence. There's no preaching, no judgment, just reflection and a fierce commitment to unity. Be one, not just think it, not just say it, be it. It's simple, not easy, but simple, and that simplicity is its brilliance. Because in a world constantly pulling you in 100 directions, the invitation to be one is a return to power, to inner stillness, to peace, to the kind of character that doesn't need applause to be whole. So choose unity, in thought, in word, in action, not just once, but every time it counts, especially when no one's watching. Because that's where your real strength lives. You don't need to switch careers to find meaning. Whatever role you're in, emperor or intern, is the perfect ground for growth. We tend to romanticize meaning as if it's waiting for us in some ideal future we haven't reached yet. But Marcus Aurelius didn't wait. He didn't say, "Once I'm done with wars and politics, then I'll get serious about philosophy." He lived it in the palace, in battle, in meetings, in grief, in stress. He practiced where he stood, because Stoicism isn't a retreat from life. It's a deeper way of living inside it. Philosophy for him wasn't a luxury. It was oxygen. And not because he had the time, but because he made the time. Because he knew the real practice of philosophy happens right in the middle of your responsibilities, not outside them. It's tempting to believe that if we just changed our job or moved to a different city or found a new passion, we'd suddenly unlock fulfillment. But Marcus saw something deeper. Meaning isn't about location. It's about attention. It's about how you choose to see and respond to your life, not where you are in it. You can be a janitor and have more wisdom than a CEO. You can work the night shift and live with more purpose than someone with 5 degrees. Because purpose isn't a title, it's a posture. It's the decision to show up, eyes open, and ask, what kind of person am I becoming in the way I do this work? That's the question that shaped Marcus's life, and it's the one that Stoicism brings to each of us, no matter our profession. It doesn't matter if you're cleaning floors or leading nations. Are you showing up with integrity? Are you practicing patience? Are you refining your thoughts? Are you aligning your actions with your values? That's the Stoic scorecard. And it's the reason why meaning is always within reach. Because meaning isn't about escaping where you are. It's about engaging where you are. Fully, honestly, and with your whole self. So many people waste years chasing the illusion that they need to find the perfect job in order to be at peace. But Marcus reminds us, peace isn't found in escape. It's found in presence, in bringing your philosophy into every conversation, every responsibility, every challenge. Viktor Frankl, the Austrian psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust, wrote, "Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose." That echoes the Stoic truth. Meaning isn't passive. It's created, built, forged in the fire of your daily experience. And what better place to practice than the place you already are? The job you complain about, that's the classroom. The co-worker who frustrates you, that's your teacher. The mundane tasks, that's your training ground. And no, you don't have to love it all. Marcus certainly didn't love every part of being emperor. He often spoke about how draining the court could be, how exhausting the politics were. But he didn't let that be an excuse to check out. He leaned in. He brought himself to it. Not a version sculpted by bitterness, but a version refined by discipline. He understood that the only thing worse than a difficult job is a wasted mind inside that job. That's why philosophy wasn't something he did on weekends. It was in the pauses between military reports. It was in the moments before speaking to the Senate. It was in the decisions he made when no one was watching. This is where meaning hides, not in different jobs, but in deeper attention. You don't need to abandon your career to live fully. You need to inhabit your day differently, to treat every task as a chance to embody your principles. That's what Marcus did. That's what Epictetus, the former slave-turned-teacher, did. That's what the Stoics passed down. Not rules for retirement, but tools for living now. When you start to see work not as a barrier to your growth, but as the very arena for it, everything shifts. Your boss's attitude becomes your test of composure. That tedious spreadsheet becomes a lesson in patience. That difficult customer becomes your opportunity to practice presence. This isn't about pretending menial things matter more than they do. It's about recognizing that you matter. And how you choose to handle those menial things reveals who you are becoming. The world doesn't need more people trying to escape their lives. It needs more people showing up for them, fully engaged, deeply grounded, radically responsible. That's what Marcus modeled. That's why we read his private thoughts today, centuries later, because he lived his philosophy in the pressure cooker of real life. You don't have to wear a robe or quote ancient texts to be a philosopher. You just have to decide, my character is my craft, my conduct is my curriculum. Philosophy isn't just for the monastery, it's for the meeting room, the construction site, the kitchen, the call center, the hospital shift at 2 a.m., because that's where life is happening. And if philosophy doesn't meet you there, it's not real philosophy, it's performance. What Stoicism offers isn't an escape from the world, it's a method for living sanely inside it. That's what makes it so practical. It doesn't say, run away from your responsibilities. It says, bring virtue to them. It doesn't say, wait for the perfect job. It says, be excellent in the one you have. And if your situation is unjust or unsustainable, then of course, work to change it. But don't wait to live with purpose. Don't wait to apply discipline, to cultivate character, to lead with wisdom. Because those things are available now, and they are yours to practice, right where you are, right in this moment. This is why Marcus's meditations are so powerful, because he didn't preach from a place of ease. He was tired, he was overwhelmed, he was losing people he loved, and still he asked himself the hard questions. Still, he tried to show up with virtue. He didn't need a new job. He needed to stay anchored. And maybe that's what you need too. Not a reinvention of your whole life, but a re-engagement with your inner life. The truth is, you bring you wherever you go. So if you're distracted, bitter, unmotivated in one career, that same version of you will show up in the next one. The deeper shift comes from inside, and Stoicism gives you the lens to begin that shift. So the question isn't, what job will give me meaning? It's, how can I bring meaning to the job I already have? That's where power lives. That's where peace begins. Not in waiting for the world to align with your expectations, but in choosing to align yourself with what matters, no matter where you are. So bring your best where you are, with what you have. That's not settling, that's sovereignty. And Marcus Aurelius lived it until his final breath. Marcus knew he'd be forgotten. Think about that. One of the most powerful men in history, ruler of the Roman Empire, commander of armies, guardian of a civilization, looked at his life and saw how small it really was in the grand scheme of time. And instead of running from that fact, he accepted it. He didn't cling to his title. He didn't place his worth in monuments or medals, or whether the history books would remember his name. He simply wanted to be good while he was here. That's the part that hits the hardest. He just wanted to be good, not famous, not praised, not immortalized, just good. That kind of humility from someone in his position is almost impossible to imagine today. We live in a world where people are constantly chasing recognition, followers, likes, legacy. But Marcus turned his attention inward. He focused on his character, not his image, on how he lived, not how he'd be remembered. Because he understood a truth most people miss until it's too late. The real legacy isn't the statue. It's how you treat the person next to you. We spend so much of our energy trying to make an impact, but the deepest impact you'll ever make won't be in headlines or history books. It will be in a quiet moment, a kind word, a helping hand, the way you made someone feel safe, the way you chose compassion over pride, the way you listened when you could have just talked. That's the real mark you leave. Not because it's flashy, but because it's real, because it ripples. One act of decency spreads. One act of grace plants seeds you may never see grow, but they grow all the same. Marcus could have written about battles and policies and reforms, but what did he write about in Meditations? Kindness, patience, self-restraint, presence. He wrote about how to carry yourself, not how to impress the world. He knew that a statue might survive 1,000 years, but a generous spirit outlives even that, because it lives on in the lives it touches. We talk a lot about legacy as if it's something we build later, after we've made it, but Marcus reminds us, legacy is now. It's not waiting for you at the end of your career. It's happening in how you treat people today, right now, in the way you answer the phone, in how you handle criticism, in whether you meet people with judgment or with gentleness. He wasn't fooled by the idea that legacy is measured in achievements. He saw that the real measure is in integrity, in how closely your actions match your values, in whether people feel more human, more seen, more valued after being around you. And that's something anyone can leave behind. You don't have to be an emperor, you just have to care, you just have to try. Carl Jung once said, "The least of things with a meaning is worth more in life than the greatest of things without it." Marcus lived that. He didn't measure his days by their grandeur, but by their goodness. He looked for meaning in the small choices, how he greeted someone, how he handled pressure, whether he stayed true to his word. That's what made him powerful, Not just the throne, but the discipline behind it. The refusal to let power rot his soul. The commitment to be decent, even when no one would have blamed him for being cruel or dismissive or selfish. Because he understood that no title lasts, no monument guarantees respect. All of that crumbles. But kindness leaves a shape in the world that doesn't fade. You don't forget how someone treated you when you were vulnerable. You don't forget the person who stayed calm when others panicked. You don't forget the leader who led with heart, not ego. So Marcus made a choice. Not to be remembered, but to be good. And maybe that's the question we should all carry into our day. Am I trying to be remembered, or am I trying to be good? They're not the same. Being remembered can lead to pride, to performance, to ego. Being good leads to presence, to patience, to a kind of steady strength that doesn't need an audience. That's what Marcus practiced, and it's what he left us. A reminder that your real legacy is in how you make people feel, in how you show up, in how well you love, lead, and live. Not later, but now. That's what lasts. That's what matters. And that's what's within your power, every single day. No dramatic moves, no massive overhauls, just one good action at a time. That's it. That's how Marcus built his character, and that's how we build ours. Not in grand gestures, not in perfect transformations overnight, but slowly, quietly, repeatedly. It's unglamorous, it's humble, and it's exactly why it works. We live in a world obsessed with speed, quick results, instant change. We're taught to believe that real transformation comes from something loud and flashy, quitting your job, moving across the world, starting a brand new life in one bold step. But that's not how character is formed. That's not how inner strength is built. Marcus knew that. He didn't try to become a better man by flipping a switch. He did it by choosing, moment after moment, to do the next right thing. It's not exciting, but it's real, and that's what makes it powerful. You wake up, you're tired, you still show up. That's one good action. You get criticized unfairly. You pause instead of lashing out. That's one good action. You're tempted to lie to protect yourself, but you tell the truth. One good action. You're in a hurry and someone needs help. You slow down. You help. One good action. These are not the kind of moves that make headlines, but they make a life. Because each one is a vote. A small affirmation of the kind of person you are becoming. The next right thing is always enough. You don't need to map out your entire future. You don't need to fix your whole life this week. You just need to take the next step well, then the one after that, and the one after that. That's how character compounds. Think about the way Marcus wrote. He didn't write as someone who had arrived. He wrote as someone still on the path. His pages are filled with reminders to himself. Be honest, be patient. Don't get pulled into drama. Control your thoughts. Return to the present. Not once, not in theory, but every day, again and again. That's the Stoic path. Not brilliance, not spectacle. Repetition, because repetition forms identity. Do it once, and it's just an action. Do it 100 times, and it becomes a habit. Do it 1,000 times, and it becomes who you are. That's how someone becomes calm. That's how someone becomes strong. That's how someone becomes trustworthy. Not all at once, but step by step, day by day, decision by decision. And even when you slip, even when you fall short, that's still part of the process. Marcus slipped too. He got angry, he got distracted, but he didn't quit. He returned, quietly, humbly. He picked up where he left off and started again. That's what matters. Not the perfection of your performance, but the persistence of your effort. Because every time you do the next right thing, even when you don't feel like it, even when it's inconvenient, you deepen the roots of who you are. Carl Jung once wrote, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." That's why Marcus didn't just talk about virtue. He tried to live it, not to impress others, but to align with himself. And the truth is, nobody sees most of these choices. Nobody applauds the quiet moment you resist gossip, or the patience you show when someone is rude, or the time you hold your tongue instead of escalating. But you see it, you feel it, and over time, you become it. Those are the real achievements, not the dramatic moments, but the consistent ones. We're told to dream big, and that's fine. But if you want to live with purpose, you don't need a grand dream. You need to do the next good thing and keep doing it. That's what Marcus did, and it's what you can do today, not someday. So start small, stay steady, keep returning, and let the life you're building speak louder than any words ever could. There's something even more important than taking the next right step. It's returning to it after you've lost your way. We all slip. We all react in ways we regret. We all make promises we break. And when that happens, it's easy to feel like the whole path is ruined, like one failure cancels everything you've done. But that's just your ego talking. That's not the voice of reason, and it's not the voice of the Stoics. Marcus knew this deeply. You can feel it in how he wrote to himself. He didn't journal like a man who had everything figured out. He journaled like someone constantly coming back to center, back to virtue, back to himself. That's why Meditations still speaks to us. Because it wasn't about achievement, it was about alignment, again and again. No matter how many times you get it wrong, you can still choose the next right thing. That's the core of Stoic strength. Not perfection, but the refusal to abandon your path just because you took a wrong turn. Let's be honest, starting is easy. Returning is harder. Anyone can get motivated once. Anyone can follow their principles for a few days. But what happens after a failure? After a meltdown? After a setback that leaves you feeling ashamed? That's the moment that really defines your growth. Because it's not about whether you fell. It's about how you respond to the fall. Most people collapse into guilt. Or worse, they pretend it never happened and move on without reflection. But the Stoic doesn't do either. The Stoic returns, quietly, without drama, without a performance, just a quiet, honest course correction. You don't need a full reinvention, you just need to come back to what matters. And you don't need to wait until Monday or next month. You can return now, right now. That's how powerful you are. Because that choice, to return, is a micro movement of the soul. It's an act of rebellion against the voice that says, "You've blown it." It's a statement that says, "No, I'm not done." And over time, those small returns become your real foundation. Carl Jung said, "I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become." That quote hits different when you realize it's not about grand transformations. It's about the tiny choices that rebuild your alignment moment by moment, especially after you've fallen out of it. Think about it. How do you build trust with a friend? It's not by expecting them to be perfect. It's by watching how they come back after they mess up. Do they admit it? Do they apologize? Do they learn? That's how you build trust with others and with yourself. Every time you return, you're telling yourself, "I haven't given up on who I want to be." That voice is stronger than shame. Because shame wants you to identify with your worst moment. But Stoicism reminds you, you are not your worst moment. You are who you choose to be after it. And choosing to return, again and again, is one of the most honest forms of strength there is. The world sees success in streaks, in perfection, in big wins, but the Stoic sees success in resets, in that quiet morning where you feel exhausted, but you still sit in silence for 5 minutes, in that rough week where everything went wrong, but you still choose not to snap at your partner, in that failure where instead of hiding, you reflect. These are the real wins. They won't go viral, but they'll build a life. Marcus failed. He got angry. He lost patience. He felt overwhelmed. And he wrote about it, not to shame himself, but to stay honest. He knew self-deception is far more dangerous than failure. So he chose awareness. He chose responsibility. He chose to return. And you can too. Let's say you lost your temper today. That doesn't mean you're a lost cause. It means you're human. The Stoic thing isn't to pretend it didn't happen. It's to pause, reflect, ask, why did that happen? What was I reacting to? What can I do next time? That moment of reflection is the return. Or maybe you gave into a distraction, spent an hour scrolling when you had work to do. Okay, what now? You don't need to beat yourself up. You need to pick the next good action. You need to move, not out of guilt, but out of clarity. That's how Marcus trained his mind. He didn't wait for the perfect moment. He didn't get paralyzed by guilt. He focused on what was within his control now. Seneca said, "Every new beginning comes from some other beginning's end." That includes the small restarts, the mental resets you choose each time you break focus and find it again. The way you reset your energy, your effort, your standards, not to be perfect, but to be intentional. Over time, this becomes a rhythm. Mess up, reset, realign, grow. You start to expect missteps, not as failures, but as part of the training. You stop aiming for flawless days and start aiming for honest ones. You stop defining yourself by your bad moments and start defining yourself by your returns. That is a deeper kind of power. It's quiet, it's invisible, but it's what makes you strong. Because anyone can hold the standard when it's easy. It's holding it again when it's been dropped that builds real character. Marcus practiced this until his final days. He didn't let power distract him from the daily work of returning, of getting back on track, of reflecting and correcting and realigning his actions with his ideals. So the next time you fall short, don't ask, "Did I fail?" Ask, "Am I coming back?" That's what matters. The return is the proof of your strength. The return is the root of your peace. The return is the clearest sign that you're growing, not perfectly, but powerfully. Not with drama, but with discipline. Not with a big moment, but with a quiet decision to begin again, again and again, until the day your life becomes the result of your returns, not your regrets. And that is more than enough. There's another part no one talks about, and yet it might be the most important of all, the neutral good, the kind of action that's not flashy, not heroic, not dramatic, just quietly right. The kind of thing you do when no one is watching, when no one will thank you, and when no one even knows. But it's what builds your soul. Holding the door without needing acknowledgement, paying a bill on time even if it goes unnoticed, giving someone your full attention when you could be distracted, following through on your word just because you said you would. These aren't achievements the world claps for, but they are the bricks of a strong character. That's what Marcus understood. That's why his teachings never leaned on showmanship. They were grounded in consistency, intention, and truth. We've been taught to chase greatness in big moves, but greatness begins in the tiny ones, the ones that feel like nothing. That's the secret no one sells you. Greatness is boring. It's routine. It's the way you treat someone when you're tired, the way you speak when you have the power to lash out but don't, the way you walk past the temptation to cut corners. That's the real power, and most of the time, it's completely invisible. That's the thing about Stoicism. It doesn't care what others see. It's not a performance, it's a practice. Marcus wasn't trying to look virtuous. He was trying to be it. He wrote to himself as a way to stay on track, not to appear enlightened. And in that honest, unfiltered space, we see the truth. The work of becoming is done quietly, in the small moments, in solitude. The world trains us to chase what gets recognition. But if you live that way, you'll always be ruled by the outside. You'll never feel whole unless someone claps for you. Stoicism flips that. It says, don't live for applause. Live in alignment. Do what's right because it's right, and let that be enough. And it is enough. It's more than enough. Because over time, those tiny, unnoticed choices build something lasting. They build someone you can trust, someone you can respect, someone who doesn't need the world to validate them because they're already grounded in what matters. Seneca warned against tying your worth to what others think. He said, if you live in harmony with nature, you will never be poor. If you live according to what others think, you will never be rich. He wasn't talking about money. He was talking about peace, about self-trust, about the wealth of integrity. Integrity is doing the right thing, especially when no one sees it. And here's the beautiful part. It doesn't take any special talent. Anyone can do this. You don't need to be strong, rich, brilliant, or successful. You just need to show up for your values. And you don't have to do it perfectly. You just have to keep doing it consistently. That's where true strength grows. Not from being loud, but from being steady. And when you live this way, something shifts. You don't need people to notice. You don't feel restless when you're not praised. You start to feel calm, because your sense of self is rooted inside, not outside. Marcus didn't write about achieving some grand destiny. He wrote about doing your job, playing your role, fulfilling your duty with honor, whether it was dramatic or not. He knew the real battle was internal, staying honest when it would be easy to deceive, staying kind when it would be easy to harden, staying disciplined when it would be easy to drift. And those choices? They're made in quiet rooms, when no one else is around. That's what makes them real. So next time you hold your tongue instead of snapping, that counts. Next time you admit you were wrong, that counts. Next time you resist the pull to gossip, or to coast, or to cut a corner, that counts. You might not feel a reward in that moment, but you are building something. You are reinforcing the person you want to become, and nothing, no paycheck, no follower count, no external validation, will ever be more fulfilling than that. You are not here to perform. You are here to become. And the becoming happens quietly. It happens in the way you move through the ordinary, in the way you choose dignity over attention, in the way you return to your values even when no one's watching. That's the kind of strength no one can fake. And it's the kind of power no one can take away. You don't need to move mountains to shape your life. You just need to take the next honest step, then the next, then the next. That's how character is built, not with noise, but with presence. That's the quiet path Marcus walked. And now, it's yours to walk too. Not everyone chooses it, but if you're here, if you've listened this far, maybe you're one of the few who will. And that matters. A lot more than you think. So thank you. Not just for watching, but for thinking deeply, for being open, for choosing to return to what's true. Thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal. If this spoke to something in you, there's more waiting. The next video on your screen is there for a reason. It might be your next step. And when you're ready, we'll be here again. Same calm voice, same deep work, same quiet path forward. Until then, stay steady, stay grounded, and most of all, stay true.